Hey listeners, it's almost Farm Progress show time, and just wanted to remind you that Ag Leader will be on display. And that's going to be one of those booths that you want to check out at the Farm Progress show here in 2022. Lot 517, it's a big enough booth, you're going to be hard to miss, but the best thing about it is you swing in there, tell them that you heard it on Farm4Profit, and you'll get entered to win their 30th anniversary giveaway prize. So congratulations to Ag Leader for 30 years being in business. Stop by their booth, see what the latest application technology looks like, which is RightSpot, in action live for you to see. Also learn about Cart Ace, which we're teasing you about this show. It'll be one of those we feature on a topic here. So check out Ag Leader at the Farm Progress show, lot 517.
But I just think it's important to point out that, it can be kind of scary, right? The FDA is having a hard time swallowing that, we're trying to put these new organisms that no one had ever isolated back into a dairy cow, but they've been there all along. It's not like we invented in some secret basement lab, like
right.
a new strain. This is something that's evolved with the animal for tens of thousands of years and is there for a reason. And by increasing their abundance, by feeding them back in, it can shape the whole ecosystem.
Ladies and gentlemen, farmers, ranchers, and distinguished guests, thank you for listening to the Farm4Profit Podcast, where we discuss the latest ideas, methods, trends, and techniques available to help your farm achieve higher levels of farm profitability. The Farm4Profit Podcast is co-hosted by Tanner Winterhoff, the Iowa Bankerman, and David Whitaker, the Iowa Land Guy, where in tandem they will share their ideas and advice from industry experts. Thank you again for listening to the Farm4Profit Podcast. Remember, if you aren't farming for profit, you won't be farming for long. And now, here's Tanner and David.
And listeners, welcome back to the Farm4Profit Podcast. This is Tanner Winterhoff.
This is Corey Hillebo.
The Iowa Banker Man, that's Tanner.
At Corn, Pork, and Beans.
Thank those new listeners for reminding us to share who we are. You can find us on any social media platform, Farm4Profit LLC. That's the number 4. I know you're here because somebody told you about us, so thank them because you're going to enjoy the journey.
Yes. And
they're going to. They have to. Now because I said it.
You have to enjoy it.
Yeah, well.
I was actually had a speaker last weekend, a motivational speaker, and the self-talk thing,
yeah,
it's real.
It is?
Yeah. Don't listen to me say. He says, don't say don't.
Oh.
If you say that you can't do something or don't do something, your subconscious is going to tell you that you can't.
Well, this is going to be an entertaining Farm4Profit episode.
You are going to learn a lot. You are a great person.
We will inject all kinds of energy.
We are a good podcast.
Oh my God, they're going to be so sick of us before we even get to the topic. But yes, if you have any ideas for topics or guests, send them to us, farm4profitllc@gmail.com. You can text us, 515-207-9640. Dave would say that is 207-YO40.
Yep. And as always, we take your reviews and we like to read them. Today's listener review is brought to you by Gearinghoff, head of the class no matter the crop. Harvest is creeping up, guys. You're going to need something. Get on it.
Sounds like a lot of our listeners have been buying heads, so thank you for doing that. But if you want one, you better get in there.
Yeah.
You better get on the list.
If you can even find it.
Yes.
Might have to get a used one, but who knows?
Absolutely. This one came from Twitter, and they asked that they remain anonymous.
Ooh.
So I don't know how we should take this. Like, anonymously, is it because it's embarrassing, or anonymously because...
Well, let's read it and see.
All right, dig into it.
Says, listened to the 2 shows with Elaine while baling hay. You could hear the Hayes boys squirming. I know I would. Thanks for bringing it up.
Oh, that makes a little more sense now. Yeah. Yes, and if you could have seen them, there were a couple of times to where, like they were wiping their sweaty palms off on their pants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, they stepped out of their comfort zone for sure. So thanks, guys, for that.
Yes. Listeners, again, Farm4Profit, we're going to focus on a topic today. Farm for Fun's the next show in the queue. That's where we focus on a person. But if you've got ideas or you want to leave us a text message, 515-207-9640. But I am excited. We are going to show our excitement about this topic today.
It's a brand new topic.
Now, Corey, we have been asked over and over again to do more episodes on livestock.
Yes, we have.
To get deeper into the livestock side, and we're listening. This is us demonstrating that we listen to your requests. So we've got a doctor with us. I think we can call her a doctor. PhD, isn't that what that means?
Yeah, that's a doctor.
We have Lisa Mortz. It rhymes with shorts, is what we were told in the pre-show. We have Lisa Mortz here, microbiome scientist from Native Microbials. She obtained her PhD in biomedical sciences from UC San Diego in 2020. During her graduate research, she developed novel protocols and computational tools to elucidate complex microbial communities through next-generation sequencing, which led to more than 20 peer-reviewed publications. Do you understand anything that I just said?
You're losing me, and there's more stuff, and there's more stuff here. I'm just wow.
Well, after she graduated, she spent her postdoctoral fellow where she focused on scaling up rapid qPCR testing. I just think we have some, I can't go any further in this introduction.
Wow.
Because I think she's overqualified for this podcast. Lisa, welcome to Farm for Profit.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Co-associated with the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
COVID.
Is that COVID?
That's right. Yeah. So we did rapid testing on campus so people could drop off their swabs and get the PCR test. And so I was just scaling that up.
And now you've moved this into working with livestock.
Yep.
All right.
Yep,
so in a better
COVID to livestock.
Yeah, there you go. So in a better way, how about you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, so my background's all in different types of molecular biology. I did a lot of things before grad school, ranging from opioid addiction research, naked mole rat research, prostate cancer, kind of led different areas of research with using molecular biology. And for my graduate studies, I focused on microbiome focused research because actually in the last 20 years, there's been a huge advancement in technology where we can sequence the DNA of anything, basically. Like you probably remember when the Human Genome Project came out, and we sequenced the entire human genome. So that was really cool. But what we've realized since then is that we can sequence anything, and every organism has DNA in it, whether it's a banana or a cow or a bacteria. And so actually using this DNA sequencing technology, we found that there's a huge diversity of organisms, microorganisms that we had no idea even existed. And they're actually all around us and within us. And so because that's so new, I switched over and focused on that during my PhD. It has a lot of really interesting translational applications, like you've probably heard of probiotics for humans. You can go into any Walmart or CVS and find a whole new array of products for humans. But at Native Microbials, we realized that it's actually a huge opportunity to apply that to livestock.
Absolutely.
Because we know that each livestock has a different microbiome, and we can harness this new information to try and make new products for them.
Absolutely. So for our listeners now, who is Native Microbials?
Native Microbials is a company. We were founded in 2015. And the idea, again, being that we can harness this new technology and DNA sequencing to identify the best organisms to improve animal health and productivity.
So can you give an example? I mean, you've said a lot of really smart things on this stuff, but what does sequencing this stuff and the microbials that you guys know, what are you guys producing? Is it like a medicine? Is it a nutritional thing?
It's live organisms that we put back into the system. So we call them endomicrobials because they're originally from that ecosystem. So you can see now across the livestock market, there's tons of different direct fed microbials that are out there, but most of them are microorganisms that are sourced from other places. So that are not from the animal originally. And so these endomicrobials are sourced from within the animal. The idea being that they're native to that environment. So native microbials.
Live organisms. That's what you're putting on your crops.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We've done a lot of that with BW Fusion.
So this is the livestock version of what you've been doing in your fields.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Trying to be more efficient and make nutrients more available and that kind of stuff. So it's those are probiotics for plants. And are these probiotics for livestock? Is that what you would call it?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, we try and use the word endomicrobial just to separate it because probiotics could be microorganisms from anywhere. But I guess that the organisms that you're putting on your soil through BW Fusion, actually, I was trying to look into it a little more. Those are organisms that are originally from the soil, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe so. I mean, they talk way over our heads as well. So, I mean, we're out of our element here. We know enough just to ask some questions, but it's nice to have an expert on.
So when you put the microbes on your soil, you see differences in the yields of your crops. It's kind of crazy, right? To see these like invisible organisms.
Well, and
change.
they have microbes that will actually fix certain nutrients and things like that. So you don't have to use as much fertilizer and things of that nature. So it's kind of crazy.
So Corey, you spray these or you spread them?
A lot. Yeah, we spray. We'll put on seed, like lots of different ways.
Yeah. So how do we get these endomicrobials into the animals, into livestock?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we put in our endomicrobials through the feed. So it has to get into the rumen. These are all, at least, so we have different product lines, right? But mostly what we're focused on right now is cattle. And what I've mostly been doing research in is dairy. So everything I say will probably be from that perspective. But regardless of the animal, it always goes through the feed. So we're trying to affect the gastrointestinal tract. So in dairy cows, that's the rumen.
So it's not an injection. We're not talking about, could some of them be through the water or is it only through the feed?
So water could also have microorganisms in it, but what we found is that almost all of the microbes that live in the rumen are anaerobic, meaning that if they're exposed to oxygen, they die. So it took us a super long time to try and figure out how to get these very sensitive microbes that only want to live in the rumen. How can you put that onto a commercial dairy farm and get that through the feed? If you put it in the water, what we found is that they'll be exposed to oxygen. So basically what we realized is that to preserve these microorganisms, we use this very special process of freeze drying to keep them really dry. So we take out all the water from them and then we encapsulate that to protect them from moisture. Once they're rehydrated, they're metabolically active again, and that's when they're sensitive to oxygen. So if we keep them dry and put them through the feed, once they hit the rumen, they'll still be alive and can rehydrate and become active.
I didn't think about that because you can't really put a pellet in water because if the coating wears off, soaks off, becomes mush, it goes away. Because you can put certain medicines into water for your livestock, right, Corey?
Well, yeah, but those aren't microbes.
Nope, they're not microbes.
They're not living.
Yeah. And it's nice that you can do this without having to use an injection.
Yeah, definitely. It makes it a lot easier to just have something that you can mix into the feed.
Is this something that all cattle, beef, and dairy or all ruminants should be doing? And what does it do as a proof of concept? How does it help them?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's different products we have to try and achieve different goals. So for dairy cows specifically, we did a big survey experiment to try and figure out which microbes would be the most beneficial for improving milk production. And so what we found through research is that it actually, by adding these microbes back in, it improves the cow's digestion, allows her to get more energy out of each bite of TMR she's taking. And then that energy can be used to improve her feed efficiency and milk production. So, but for beef cows, for example, you want them to have a lower RFI or be able to put on weight quicker from the amount of food they're eating. So we have a different line of microbes specific to beef cattle.
And is it only cattle or what other animals have you guys been working with?
Yeah, so basically any animal, every animal we've studied as a scientific community has its own microbiome. So any animal could have a probiotic tailored for it. But for our company, we focus mostly on cattle. We also have a poultry product, and we've launched a pet product for canines, so pet dogs.
Is it a product that keeps my grass from turning brown when they pee in my yard?
I wish that would be a good one. We did it to help make their poops better. A lot of dogs actually increasingly have been diagnosed with IBS, which is kind of surprising, like irritable bowel syndrome. These dogs get real bad diarrhea, or sometimes, I don't know, if you have pet dogs, sometimes they'll eat something bad and get the runs. So this product is more for improving their gut health that way.
Huh. Never thought about that. The dogs never usually poop in the house unless it's diarrhea.
And then
Yeah, because they couldn't hold it. I feel for them, but it's always on a good rug or something that you don't want them to either.
Yeah,
have you ever done anything for pigs? I'm just naturally interested in pigs because we grow pigs on our farm.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we've talked about it a little bit, but that's not something we have like being actively developed. Pigs are harder just because the feed that they're eating is way more diverse.
Yeah, it's
So,
amazing. I mean, we're changing rations almost weekly,
wow.
especially as they get bigger and they eat a lot. It just seems like they really have the diets dialed in, because we can take a pig from 12 pounds to 300 pounds in like 5 months, 5.5 months.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot faster than a cow.
Yeah.
That is a big side of this. So, Farm for Profit podcast. A lot of our listeners listen to us just for the sheer fact that we promise ideas on how they could make more money. So when you're doing your research and your testing, you kind of already hit on, if you can make the animal more efficient, that should drive profitability. Is that accurate? Is that an accurate assumption?
Yeah, that's our goal, is to use all this new information to improve the livestock industry and help make people more profitable and more sustainable in their industry. So by improving feed efficiency, we can do those kind of analyses, right? To see what the ROI is, to see how decreasing dry matter intake versus increasing milk production affects your return on investment. But ultimately, yeah, that's the goal, to make a more efficient animal that for every dollar you put in, you get more out because she's digesting that instead of just pooping it out.
How big of samples have you guys worked with? Are you nationwide, or are you still working in a pretty focused area?
Yeah, we're scaling up. So we've run 6 different academic trials with different universities on our newest product for dairy cows, Glaxus Frontier. So those studies were done across the U.S. But on a commercial scale, we are approved in, I would say, about like half the states right now, where it's a state-by-state kind of approval process. And mostly we're focused on the West, but we're scaling east pretty rapidly. So most of our dairies today that are on product are in California, in Colorado, Arizona, Southwest.
When you say approved, who's approving this? Is this an EPA thing?
No, it's a good question. It's pretty complicated. So ultimately, to get a new product approved for a feed supplement for livestock, there's different routes you can go. Because these are living organisms, there's this thing called the GRAS list, generally recognized as safe. And so this is a list of organisms that kind of got grandfathered into being safe. Things like Lactobacillus acidophilus, stuff that, people have been eating, through yogurt, or Saccharomyces cerevisiae, through beer and bread for hundreds of years. Of course it's safe, right? They kind of just like recognize it as safe. And so because these are microbes that are naturally occurring within cows, we're trying to add them to the GRAS list, but it's just, a long approval process. So it's actually going through the FDA.
The FDA?
Mm-hmm. I know.
She just slipped that in there like that was no big deal.
I mean, because it eventually ends up in your mouth, in your stomach. So that makes sense.
So is Native the only ones working and developing this type of product, or is there others out there doing the same type of process?
Well, I know that we just had a huge breakthrough in getting one of our organisms onto the generally recognized as safe list through the FDA, and we were the first people to add one on in a really long time. So it was definitely a big deal, and it was not very easy, right? There's a lot of bureaucracy that goes on with it. In terms of other companies that are trying to do similar things, there's definitely a lot of direct-fed microbials. But the vast majority of them, like I said, are just using products or organisms that are already on that list or are already, easy to grow and ferment. So in terms of people that are isolating new organisms from the rumen, there's not any companies that I know of doing that.
I'm sitting here and wonder, because until we got reached out to do this episode, I hadn't even thought about it. Here we've been talking for 1.5 years with our partner BW Fusion on how you can use microbials in the field. And who'd have thought that this is something I could be giving my dog so we don't have accidents in the house?
Well, I mean, it makes sense, because that's, us as humans have every supplement and microbes and probiotic, available to us, good or bad. So why not in livestock?
So the other supplements, for example, my in-laws have a fat cattle feed yard, and I know that they're adding ingredients. Are those artificially made, or are a majority of the livestock supplements now not natural?
Oof, I don't know if I know the answer to that question. I mean, a lot of the supplements that I hear about are are naturally derived chemicals, right? Or
Yep.
fractions of different feed ingredients. But I just think it's important to point out that, it can be kind of scary, right? The FDA is having a hard time swallowing that, we're trying to put these new organisms that no one had ever isolated back into a dairy cow, but they've been there all along. It's not like we invented in some secret basement lab, like
Right.
a new strain. This is something that's evolved with the animal for tens of thousands of years and is there for a reason. And by increasing their abundance, by feeding them back in, it can shape the whole ecosystem. So yeah, I think I'm glad that you guys are thinking it's cool, because it's such a fun field for me. It's like a field that is brand new. It's like we have these ecosystems within us, within all of us sitting here now, and we didn't even know about them until we were able to see, right, which organisms are there. And that was enabled by this new sequencing technology.
How do you, when you guys are going through the process of identifying what microorganism you want to isolate next, or what process you're going to take steps on to improve the livestock world, how do you go about deciding what's going to work for an animal, or what your next product's going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That was a lot of questions. I know that was really poorly done.
Yeah.
So what,
Easy, Dave.
I know. So let's break it down. How do you decide what project you're going to work on?
Well, I mean, we're a business, right? So in the end, we want to see what people are interested in and what has the most room for improvement. And so actually, when our company first started, the CEO came from a company that worked on microbial products for soil, and kind of left that and was ready to start something new. And he was looking around, where can we apply this new information about microbes? And livestock was kind of the obvious choice, because they were looking at what is currently available for direct fed microbials on the livestock market. And there was, the same old organisms that have been fed for literally hundreds of years in some cases. And so they've just found that it was ripe for changing things. So like you were talking about, swine is already like super dialed in. They're really fast growers. Whereas with dairy cows and beef cows, people have been doing selective breeding for, hundreds, if not thousands of years, but we know that there's all this genetic potential that isn't being fully utilized. Like, we don't know what the limit is in terms of what's the limit of how many pounds of milk a cow can make a day, or how fast a beef cow can grow. But we know we haven't maxed out on it like we have maybe in some other livestock. So we just found that this was a problem where there was a lot of potential for growth. And so especially in ruminants, we know that like cows are dependent on their microbiomes. Like you can grow some organisms without any microbes on them, like in a like a bubble boy kind of situation where you have them in a sterile environment. But you cannot do that with a dairy cow. She's absolutely dependent. So it was a good place to try and change that system.
Can you imagine, Corey, if they figured out a way to make hogs that already grow really fast even faster?
I can't. No, that.
By adding
Honestly,
microbials?
I don't want to load pigs anymore than I already do. But I do think you could probably improve pigs' guts. They might just need a probiotic just to have a good gut, because it does seem like they are such a racehorse. They're riding this thin line of performance that if they do get off a little bit, their guts go bad and like ulcers can come in and things of that nature. So that could be a potential for you guys.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's also like, this is a profit show, so you guys know that that's what everyone's thinking about, but people don't put as much money into the feed for swine as they do for other things too. So that's been kind of a hurdle for us. It's like, what would people be willing to pay versus how much it costs to do all the R&D associated with designing a new microbial product?
So say we're going to go down that path. We are going to work on gut health of the swine industry. Mm-hmm. How does Native go about decoding the gut, the animal? How do you guys first start the process of trying to figure out what's going to work?
Yeah, so the very first thing we do is what we call like a survey experiment, where we just collect as many samples as we can to try and get a snapshot of what organisms are living in, in this case, the swine gut on a regular basis. So we would collect samples from swine all across the country, eating different diets during different seasons at different phases of their growth, swine that are really sick, swine that are really killing it, growing really fast, and collecting all that data. So we have this big picture of which different organisms are there and which ones are consistently there across all these differences. There's some organisms we found this across the animal kingdom, that there's something called a core microbiome. So while every organism might have its own unique kind of like fingerprint of different microbes, there's usually a core subset that's found in almost every animal almost all the time. So we'd look to see which organisms are in almost all swine. Those are probably the ones that have evolved for a long time and are really important to swine health, and then try and figure out which microbes are associated with the swine that are growing really fast, that are really healthy, that are not there when the swine is sick or not growing well. So there's a lot of different ways to do that kind of analysis. A lot of cool new computational tools to try and tie that together, because these data sets end up being so huge. There's many thousands of unique organisms within a swine gut. In the rumen, there's tens of thousands of unique organisms. So this isn't, a data set that you could open up in Excel. It takes a lot of special tools to do it. And so we actually borrow algorithms that were designed for different like social media platforms like Facebook to try and identify the influencers of the microbiome. Which organisms, when they change in their abundance, they change the abundance of a bunch of other organisms around them.
Holy crap.
Better talk to Snark. He's got algorithms for
who
markets and all that.
Who would have thought? And yes, I did get excited when you mentioned Excel.
Yeah.
The banker in me was all like, "Oh, man, I could do this."
If anyone can do it on Excel, it's Tanner.
we'll make
Right.
Excel work. But I love that analogy of you're looking for the influencers. You're looking for, because I was thinking the strongest, but it's not always
Right.
going to be that. You need the ones with the most influence.
Yeah, Keystone Organisms.
Keystone.
And we got that from, a lot of the framework for how we think about microbial ecosystems is borrowed from macro ecosystems. So these guys that, back in the 50s were counting how many trees, different shrubs were in a different environment, and how they describe that. We actually use a lot of that framework for describing the microbial systems.
Wow. So after you find these microorganisms that you want to...
The influencers.
Yeah, the influencers that you want to put into a product. I mean, imagine you got to like farm these things. You got to grow them. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So once we identify the influencers, which like you were saying, Tanner, it can be kind of surprising because they're not always the ones that are the strongest or like the most abundant. Usually they're actually more rare or have relatively low abundance because they're not prioritizing doubling and growing as fast as they can, but they're prioritizing special metabolic pathways that help them break down things that influence all the other organisms around them. So once we find those, and they're usually pretty rare, it's hard to then isolate them from the samples. So we have here, just a few feet away from me, a giant lab that has all these anaerobic chambers, which is just like it's like a glove box that has all the air really regulated, so you can make sure there's no oxygen in there, just carbon dioxide, nitrogen, a little bit of hydrogen. And you can bring the sample in there where the organisms are nice and happy, and then streak them out and try and grow them in different types of media to enrich for the ones that are rare, that you're interested in. And so what we end up having is a huge bank full of different isolates, and then we can see which of those isolates were from our list were like the top hits for the biggest influencers. And then once we have a hit, we have to work on scaling up the growth of it. So yeah, Corey, actually that's a huge part of the puzzle, is just figuring out how to go from, maybe sure it's easy enough to grow an organism in a little petri dish in a lab, but how do you grow it in 30,000 liter tanks and get it to the scale where, you can feed thousands of cows?
And I imagine each microbe isn't grown the same, correct?
Yes, you're totally right. And a lot of these microbes, we don't know how to grow. So some of them actually, the only way we can get them to grow is if we put in some sterile filtered rumen fluid. We don't know what the secret sauce is, but there's something that they need to grow. And a lot of times we have to figure out what that is. Or we'll start with a really complex media, just throw everything in there, all the vitamins, all the sugars, and then we have to work to make it, more efficient to grow it up. We have to figure out, okay, what's the minimum media they need to grow. So that takes up a lot of our time.
It's almost like you need to grow them in the rumen. I used to work at a livestock nutrition center, and they had fistulated steers. They actually had holes in the side of their, on the side of them, and you could reach your hand in and get rumen juice. kind of nasty.
Yeah.
It stunk really bad in there. But it was great for research.
Great for research. Yeah, I've heard that you don't want to be around when a fistulated cow sneezes, but
No.
it's a great way. Actually, that's how we got a lot of our organisms, was from grabbing that chunky rumen fluid mass and then bringing that back into the chambers in our lab.
I thought she was going to say when they sneezed. Like, hey, there you go. Just got to find out what the cows are allergic to, or tickle their nose with a feather.
Yeah.
No, that was such
There's
a
just
bad
a lot
joke.
of pieces of the puzzle.
I'm curious. So now you can grow it. You've got it, but now there's going to be some calculation or observation to make sure you don't overdose. I mean, is there such a thing as overdosing an animal? I mean, can you get too much of a good microbial?
Honestly, I don't think so. So to do any of this testing, of course, and to get it approved by the FDA, you have to show that it's safe, right? A lot of these tests are done in smaller animals like mice. You just give them way above the dose that they're supposed to get and make sure they're okay. And we haven't seen any problems. We fed tens of thousands of cows this product and never seen any negative health events. Like I said, they're natural to that environment, so it doesn't cause an allergic reaction in the cow or anything. Honestly, I wish it could be a higher concentration. It's just trying to scale up. There's so many microorganisms in the rumen. It's crazy. There's actually more microorganisms in the rumen than there are stars in the known galaxy. So even though we're putting in billions of colony forming units, it's a relatively small fraction of what's already there.
Whoa. That was that's what drew me back out of my daydream of imagining a drunk naked mole rat. When I was talking about overdosing, but just to state how many microorganisms are in the rumen compared to the galaxy.
Naked mole rat is one of my favorite things to say. Naked mole rat.
She didn't know saying that in her introduction was going to stick around for the rest of the episode.
No idea.
I think we both wrote it down on our sheet of paper.
You just don't let things like that go.
No.
Yeah.
So do you ever stumble upon combinations? Do you ever stumble upon influencers that work well together, that team up?
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out a consortium of microorganisms. I mean, just as a baseline, it passes the sniff test, right? That one organism is good, but you're putting it into this dense community, so you might want a team of them. So actually, in our dairy cow product, for example, there's 4 unique microorganisms that go into it. And the idea is that they are all covering different bases. So when we look for those influencers, what we do actually is make a map. It's called a network analysis. It kind of looks like those things in detective movies where they have pins and they're drawing strings between them. Yeah, it's like that. And you want the ones that have the most strings going to it. When we did this analysis, we found that they kind of cluster the organisms into functional groups. So this cluster over here is breaking down a lot of different recalcitrant fibers. And this cluster over here is producing a bunch of volatile fatty acids. And this group over here is doing biohydrogenation. So what we do is try and pick organisms from different clusters so there's stacked functional capabilities. We don't want a bunch of organisms that are all doing the same thing.
So you've identified the problem, you've found the microbes, you've grown them, and you packaged it into a product that can be used. Now let's go to the farm. We got to feed, we're on a dairy farm or we're on a beef farm. We need to mix thousands of tons of feed, a year, and it needs to be mixed at. Am I putting a 50-pound bag of these microbes in, or how is it getting into the system?
Yeah, so microbes are really, really small. So the dose for a cow on our current product is 5 grams per head per day.
Wow, I'm just thinking about you put that little bit into the feed wagon at the feed yard, you're not even going to notice it.
It's very tiny, but to your point, Corey, that means we have to make sure it's mixed in thoroughly and evenly, because you're never just making a meal for one cow. A lot of times you're doing the 30,000 pound load of TMR, and we have to make sure that the product gets evenly distributed. So, there's different ways we can do mixing audits to make sure that it's getting distributed so that each cow is getting that 5 gram dose.
Is it like a pellet or granular, or what's the consistency?
Yeah, it's like a powder. So so the microbes are fermented up, and then we do that special freeze drying method I was talking about. It's called PBV. And then we mill it into tiny little fractions that are 100 or 200 microns in diameter. encapsulate that. So it's maybe a few hundred microns in diameter. So it looks like dust. We mix it with calcium carbonate and zeolite to keep it dry. So in the end, it's like like a gray powder. So it's really small particles. But what we can do is we worked with this company called MicroTracer that makes small magnetic particles of a very similar size that are colored. And so you can mix that in just like you would mix in the product, and then pull samples down the bunk and then count up how many of these little magnetic tracer particles are in there to try and get an idea of how evenly distributed it is.
So if you're feeding this to a cow daily, is there a point where do they always need this dose daily, or does their environment start to support that and grow themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question. At first, we played around with different ways of doing it. Can we just give one giant dose at the beginning and she's done? But what we found is that the microbiome is always being shaped by the environment. So what the cow's eating, what her immune system's doing, what the other microbes in her rumen are doing. So we found that to have these lasting impacts, you need to put daily pressure on. I don't know if you guys have heard of that study that I think Paul Weimar was the first one to do it at Ohio State, where they did the rumen swap.
No.
You heard of this? They took 2 buckets, took all the rumen fluid out of 2 cows, and then swapped them. Like poured the rumen fluid from one cow into the other. And then they tried to track and see how it changed over time. And within like a month or 2 months, depending on the experiment, it was back to where it started. Like,
really?
Wow.
Yeah, the cow is shaping what's in there. And so we have to have this daily additive to see the effects. And we see that actually pretty quick on farm too. So it takes a while to build up the effect. But then if you stop feeding, unfortunately, it goes away faster. So we kind of look at the rumen microbiome like a spring, and you have to keep the pressure on it. And if you let it go, it's faster to bounce back.
What's different about if those 2 cows are standing next to each other, eating the same thing in the same environment? Does it like DNA? Yeah.
Oh, that's such a fun question because people are still trying to figure that out. We know that there's some genetic contribution, just like what your genes are. But we also know that there's like vertical transmission. So what your mom's microbiome looked like and how it develops in the first few months of life is really important. A lot of this research is done from like humans or animal models, but there's also been more studies lately coming out in livestock showing the same things.
That's probably also why if you're sitting at a dairy and they're being fed the same ration every day, why you get different pounds production from one cow to the next.
Absolutely.
It'd be interesting to target those that are lower producing. I mean, why not increase the production of all? I get that. But to target those that are lower producing, if you could sort them off and feed this to see if you could bring the levels, and maybe you've already done that, bring the levels up.
Usually, we're feeding a whole herd, but in one of our first studies we did at Iowa State with Lance Baumgard, we found that the cows that were lower producers had the biggest improvements in milk production. But so far with like the newer version of our product, that was like with a kind of our beta launch version of the product, so far we've been seeing that even cows that are really high producing are still going up. So again, we don't know the limit.
We didn't say that earlier. You're working with Iowa State?
We did a study. Yeah, we have a published paper that we did with them back. I think it came out in 2019 or 2020.
Okay. Well, they're just right up the road from us. So if you get out here, you should definitely look us up. It's about 8 miles.
Awesome. Yeah. It's really close.
The big dairy farm it's nice.
It is a nice facility.
Really nice. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, we're just continually doing research. So, it's been fun to work with a bunch of professors at these nice farms where they have, grad students running it. You get a bunch of information. But in my role too, we've been doing like commercial dairy trials, which is pretty cool to see the effects, not just, in a controlled setting, but in the real world.
I think she's one of the coolest doctors that we've had on the podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just geeking out over this. Wow, I did not expect it to go this deep.
So if I'm a dairy farmer, if I'm Iowa dairy farmer Dan, and I want to try this, what is the best route to do that? Yeah,
you can check out our website. We've got sales reps that are, we're slowly spreading east, but we've got people all over. So just hit us up on the website, and we'll get you directed to where you need to go.
Okay.
Because you're in production. It's not still in study stage. You have products that are rocking and rolling.
That's right. And we're scaling it up. And we're working on the next one. We're a relatively young company. We're relatively small right now, but we're going out with this new version of, especially our dairy cow product is the one that's the most advanced. But, we still have an active lab we're pulling out. We're trying to get more influencers from the microbiome, trying to figure out the next version of the product, trying to expand to different animals where we're starting to scale up a horse product. Like I mentioned, we have a canine product, got a beef one in the pipeline. So yeah, we're continually growing.
Are you guys looking for more scientists and salespeople?
Absolutely.
That's the right answer.
Yeah, people that are passionate about bringing new science to the field. And, it's the fun place to work. It's not always easy because, you're kind of building the plane while you're flying it. We're getting new information and figuring out when the best time is to apply the product, how diets might interact with it, how breed or season. So it's a lot of fun to be getting new data, and it's great to work with people that are excited about it.
Yeah. It seems like it could be fulfilling and very exciting because you're on the edge. Like it's not something that we have figured out, To me, it would be boring to work on something that you already know works.
Yeah, find something new.
Yep.
That could change the industry.
That's the dream. It's cool for me as someone that I didn't know anything about agriculture until a year and a half ago. And so it's really fun to go from being in a lab where you're just kind of moving clear liquid around with little pipettes to all of a sudden being whoa, this can actually have an impact on dairy. Everybody loves cheese. Everyone wants to put cream in their coffee. Where does that come from? Yeah. Learning about that and learning about how this new technology can improve that has been so fun.
I don't think if she would have not said that, I would have guessed that you just got introduced to the industry heavy on only a year and a half ago.
No, I wouldn't have guessed that, no.
It's been, I got thrown into the deep end.
Well, you're doing a good job with it. So we don't always do the best of job on our interview. We try to ask curious questions. Do we miss anything obvious that our listeners would enjoy learning?
Let's see. There's a lot of cool stuff about the rumen microbiome. I think we covered a lot of the basics.
Good. Sometimes we get lucky and do a good job.
Are you guys on social media anywhere?
Yeah, we have an Instagram account. I don't think we have a Facebook account yet.
I kind of want to go look this Instagram account up to see if it's just beakers and pipettes.
There are some cool micro pictures on there.
That's
a lot of cow pictures.
That's pretty cool. Well, I'm going to summarize our conversation for today. So be thinking about what the best advice you personally have ever been given is, and we'll come back to you to get the answer to that question. But we had Lisa here, Lisa Marotz, rhymes with shorts, on. She's one of our new favorite doctors on the podcast, coming to us from Native Microbials. We hit the microbial side of livestock in a conversation I think that surprised both of us. We started off talking about naked mole rats. We got to say that twice. But this company was founded in 2015. A lot of similarities between what the microbes are doing that we've learned about through BW Fusion into those with the livestock. Microbes are native to animals. They are safer. And endomicrobial is the descriptive term for something that's already found in the animal. So it's nothing new that's being introduced. They work on ways to get those microbials into the animals. They've discovered that going through the feed so far is the best way. We don't have to worry about injection. Water isn't the best route, but we get it in there through the feed. They use a freeze-dry process to make their product. And we learned that it's right now the consistency from Native is a powder. Small, very granular, but more like a soft powder that goes in. They're focused right now on dairy and beef production, but they have products for, I believe, the poultry side.
That's right.
They have some for the canines and are exploring other animals as well, because we asked about hogs. We're working on gut product. Corey and I are going to be test dummies for that one, but they work to identify the keystone organisms or the influencers and then separate those off, figure out a way to grow them and reproduce in an effective manner to where they can be added back into the feed. It is, Corey, I wrote down on here, it seems so simple, but extremely complicated to get this process all the way to the finish line. Got to be careful in their process. It seems strenuous to get new microbes introduced into the GRAS list. Did I do that correct? Into the GRAS list? Yes.
Yep.
And the FDA is ultimately the governing body of approving those. But coming soon to a feedlot near you, a team of microbes. How'd I do, Lisa?
Great.
Awesome. So what is the best advice you have ever been given?
A good friend of mine told me that you should always get out of your comfort zone. So if you're feeling too comfy and bored, it's time to move.
Yep.
I bet you guys do that a lot.
Yeah, I'm not bored very often anymore.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. No, that is a good one. Perfect. Easy, simple. Corey, do you have a challenge for them?
Yeah, it's mainly going to be for the livestock people since it's a livestock show. But I would say get out of your comfort zone. Like Lisa said, go check out their website and see if this could work for you, because this could be the next thing that sets you aside from one of your competitors and makes you more profitable.
Yeah, nativemicrobials.com. Awesome. Lisa's shaking her head yes. It's been a pleasure to have you on the Farm4Profit Podcast. Do you have any personal social media or links or connections that you want to share, or just send them to the Native Microbials website?
Yep, Native Microbials website is good. You can look me up on LinkedIn too if you want to touch base or ask more questions.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Listeners, we also appreciate you. So until next time, make sure you have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Remember, if you aren't farming for profit, you won't be farming for long.